South Africa's presidency says it remains firmly committed to supporting efforts to restore peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows the recent escalation of violence by the M23 rebel group, which has seized the strategic town of Uvira. Speaking at a media briefing in Pretoria today, presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says diplomatic engagements with the DRC are continuing at various levels.
South Africa, through SADC, as well as the AU, and in support of the United Nations efforts in bringing about peace in the DRC, has been seized with efforts to bring about a peaceful solution to the challenges facing the DRC for close to 30 years. And that is a commitment that remains, firmly so. There is ongoing engagements at various levels, diplomatic levels, between ourselves as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo. So those engagements remain ongoing. Yes, indeed. We are monitoring the situation.
In the same briefing, Magwenya reiterated that South Africa's presidency will not ask G20 member countries to boycott the next meeting in Miami, Florida. This after U.S. President Donald Trump said South Africa would not be invited to the gathering next year. Today, the U.S. went ahead with the G20 Sherpas meeting in Washington, excluding South Africa. This is despite South Africa being one of the founding members of the G20. Magwenya says government is encouraging G20 members to condemn the U.S. for its stance.
We have encouraged members to express quite strongly their own views, as they've expressed to us their support as well as their rejection of the US's position and decision in this regard, which was taken unilaterally in a body that takes decision through consensus. What we are not going to do, which is not going to be helpful, we're not going to ask countries to boycott G20 meetings and G20 processes.
Still in South Africa, the Belfast Magistrates Court in the Mpumalanga province has remanded in custody a 43-year-old Zimbabwean national found in possession of hundreds of passports and cash. Edward Chitaizvi made a brief appearance following his arrest. Officers found over 580 passports and over $8,000 in cash hidden in his bakkie in Waterval Boven a week ago. Chitaizvi is suspected to have been on his way to meet someone who would have stamped the passports illegally. The money is suspected to have been meant to bribe that person. The accused is facing charges of fraud, money laundering and contravening the Immigration Act. The case has been postponed to Thursday for bail. And finally, it has emerged that one of the two gunmen who shot dead at least 15 people at a Jewish celebration in Sydney yesterday had been investigated over links to a militant group. The father and the son opened fire on hundreds of people marking the first night of Hanukkah at Bondi Beach. The BBC's Phil Mercer has more.
We understand that the father and the son were holding out in a rented house in a suburb in Sydney in preparation for this attack with 6 legally held firearms. The older man was shot dead. His 24-year-old son, he was critically injured and he's in hospital. We know that the father arrived in Australia on a student visa in the late 1990s. We don't know too much more, but we do know that his son was investigated by the authorities in 2019 and was deemed not to be a threat at that time. So I would imagine all of these details will be revisited.
Recapping the top story this hour, the Rwanda-backed M23 group has captured hundreds of Burundian soldiers during its latest offensive in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. This as clashes continue despite a warning from the Trump administration. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, South African club boss claims bias in sponsorship landscape in South Africa, while tennis icon applauds historic WTA and Mercedes-Benz partnership. Details of these and other stories coming up at 4:30.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It has gone exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good Monday, the 15th of December to you. Here's what we've got on the agenda. We'll be looking at Aliko Dangote, founder and president of the Dangote Group. He is calling for an official inquiry into Farouk Ahmed. That's the head of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. He's claiming that the increased imports of oil into Nigeria are stifling domestic economic growth and also preventing the creation of jobs. That is one of the problems that his refinery was supposed to solve. But if the regulatory authority is not going to create an environment where that can happen, Aliko Dangote believes that that should be looked into. Also, I wonder what you've been ordering, what you've been eating and what you've loved. Well, as far as takeouts are concerned, of course, Uber Eats have just released their SA Cravings report. We'll be talking to the general manager for Uber Eats Sub-Saharan Africa, Ntswaki Nsibanyoni, this afternoon to find out what the palate of South Africans has been this past year. And I don't know if you are one of the people who has deposited funds into Itala Bank. Well, if you are, you'll know that since January, you haven't been able to access those funds. Well, good news for you, just in the nick of time for this festive season, that your funds are now going to be accessible via First National Bank. In our FNB feature this afternoon, we'll speak to Jackie O'Sullivan, the Executive for Corporate Affairs at FNB, who'll tell us about how this is going to be rolled out. National Treasury having given them that responsibility to facilitate those payouts and transactions. Do interact with us on our various social media platforms on X, Facebook and Instagram, as well as on YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1. And you can also send us your stories at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za.
The voice of the continent, now online, with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more.
We start here this afternoon with a look at South Africa's economy. The president of the country has welcomed what he describes an encouraging economic gain as the year draws to a close, citing a stronger rand, modest economic growth and an improvement in employment. Briefing the media, in presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya said the currency has strengthened against major competitors, including the US dollar. GDP expanded by 0.5% in the third quarter and unemployment declined by 31.9%, with a construction sector leading job creation. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
South Africa's presidency convened a media briefing to provide an update on the presidential program and to engage the public on key topical issues of national interest. The briefing formed part of ongoing efforts to promote transparency, outline progress on government priorities, and respond to matters shaping the country's social and economic discourse. In his address, presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya highlighted the significant gains recorded by South Africa's currency, the rand.
The rand is holding its own against major currencies and has breached the level of 17 rands to the US dollar. GDP grew by 0.5% in the third quarter, meaning that the economy is expanding. Much remains in the pipeline to achieve higher growth rate. Its centrality is to attain the country's developmental aspirations. Unemployment for quarter three was down by 1.3 percentage points to 31.9%, with the construction sector the major contributor, with 130,000 new jobs out of a total of 248,000 new jobs.
He stated that the government plans to invest about $60 billion in infrastructure projects over the next 3 years.
Government will spend R1 trillion over the next 3 years on infrastructure projects. Stability of energy supply is central to this turnaround, and we should be building on the successes thus far to the next level, as we are doing. This year, the Youth Employment Service reached the milestone of 200,000 young South Africans funded and placed into quality first job experiences.
Magwenya added that international confidence has improved, citing South Africa's first sovereign rating upgrade in 2 decades by Standard & Poor's, alongside the International Monetary Fund raising the country's growth outlook for 2025 and 2026.
South Africa achieved its first rating upgrade in 20 years when the ratings agency Standard & Poor upgraded the country's foreign currency long-term sovereign credit rating to BB from BB minus. In addition, the local currency long-term sovereign credit rating was adjusted to BB plus from BB. The International Monetary Fund lifted its growth forecast for the country to 1.3% in 2025 and 1.4% in 2026. This is from 1.1% and 1.2% respectively.
He attributed the improvement to policy direction outlined in the 2025 State of the Nation address, noting that the Government of National Unity has adopted the Medium-Term Development Plan for 2024 to 2029, anchored on inclusive growth and job creation, poverty reduction and cost of living relief, and the building of state capacity.
You could rightly ask, what is the yardstick we should use for government in this regard? And that's quite easy. The document to start is the State of the Nation Address, and in this instance, it is the SONA 2025 that was delivered by President Ramaphosa in February of this year. In his address, the President announced that the Government of National Unity has adopted the Medium-Term Development Plan for the period 2024-2029, the MTDP, which sets out 3 key priorities of government. These priorities are to drive inclusive growth and job creation, to reduce poverty, and to tackle the high cost of living, and lastly, to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
As 2025 draws to a close, we pause to honor the spirits that connect us. The festive season reminds us of what truly matters: family, community, and unity. No matter where you gather or reflect, Channel Africa is with you, bringing you stories and voices that are shaped by the African perspective.
Something significant happened on this day. Asanda, you were a baby, I'm sure. I'm not even sure if you were born. No, you were a baby, yeah.
Yoga. Matseko is still trying to convince me and look me over.
I've done that already, and you're going to come now on the journey.
I will try.
From all of us to all of you, may your season be safe and peaceful. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus now to Nigeria, where the founder and president of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, over the weekend, addressing the media, claimed that the persistent fuel imports are undermining domestic refining efforts and threatening jobs. Dangote added that imports are being exploited to checkmate domestic potential, he says, shifting employment and investment overseas, while Nigeria struggles to expand its industrial base. He also called for an official inquiry into Farouk Ahmed, the head of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, citing concerns over alleged mismanagement and personal expenditures exceeding legitimate earnings. For more on this, we're joined on the line by senior international trade consultant and author of Economic Diplomacy of the Diaspora, Collins Nweke. A very good afternoon to you, Collins. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you, Thami. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
So Dangote's been very vocal about this. It's not the first time, but once again, this has come to the forefront. What are your views on his claims that ongoing fuel imports are hurting domestic refining and costing jobs in the country?
Dangote's claim is economically sound, absolutely sound. When a country continues to import refined fuel, despite having emerging domestic capacity to actually produce, their own fuel, it undermines local value chains from refining workers to logistics, petrochemicals, and downstream services. Domestic refining is not just about fuel availability. It is about jobs. It is about skills transfer. It is about foreign exchange conservation and industrial confidence. Persistent imports distort the market, keep domestic refineries underutilized, and it also delays job creation. Like you heard Dangote said, I mean, the jobs are somewhere abroad. Some are being shipped. So no country has industrialized by prioritizing imports over domestic production. Nigeria cannot be an exception, and that is essentially the point that Dangote is making. So he's absolutely correct.
The establishment of his refinery was supposed to change this entire paradigm around. It was supposed to stimulate the domestic production of oil, as you say, also create jobs. Dangote also spoke about fuel imports being used by, I quote, oil mafias in order to block the local refinery that he is trying to establish. Just your comments on that, and how deeply rooted is corruption in Nigeria's fuel sector, and where does it mostly happen?
Well, Thami, corruption in Nigeria's fuel sector is structural rather than spectacular. The difference is very clear. Today, it rarely shows up as cash exchanging hands. So you're not going to see people, exchanging brown envelopes or, bank transfers of heavy sums of money, running from one account to the other. That is not going to happen. It shows up as regulatory capture, selective enforcement, opaque licensing, delayed approvals, and moving quality benchmarks. These are the sort of things that Dangote and Nigeria as a nation state has been, suffering over the last period. The problem is not one institution alone, but a network of incentives that rewards import dependency over production. When rules are applied inconsistently, vested interests, the so-called, oil mafias, as, Dangote called it, they thrive quietly. That is why allegations of oil mafias resonate, because the system has historically favored intermediaries over producers. And that is essentially, where the bottleneck is.
And how effective has the Nigerian National Petroleum Company been in ensuring transparency in the importation of fuel? Has this been a priority for them?
Well, the NNPC Limited, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, the state, oil company, has made notable governance improvement. There is absolutely no doubt about that since commercialization, particularly in publishing audited accounts and adopting a corporate structure. However, transparency in fuel importation remains partial and uneven. And, that is very much evident. Pricing formulas, import volumes, and contracting processes are still insufficiently visible to the Nigerian public. Transparency is not only about reports, it's not only about audits, it's about trust. And trust is built when data is consistent, timely, and independently verifiable. Nigeria hasn't got any of this. So we are, as a country, Nigeria, far from transparency, and that is why corruption is perceived to be very, very rife.
So Dangote's oil refinery did receive, some backlash even during its construction. He speaks about the oil mafia resisting the refinery because it threatened their business model. Is this a viewpoint that is supported by the industry and by his industry peers? And what type of support does Dangote have in this rhetoric? Is he just one man against a system, or has he got greater muscle behind him as well from his peers?
Well, the point here is that, fuel imports rose largely because Nigeria failed to plan a phased transition from imports to domestic refining. Instead of aligning policy, infrastructure, and offtake guarantees ahead of refining completion, the country allowed the old system to continue uninterrupted, Thami. Yes, resistance was inevitable. This happens everywhere in the world. The refinery threatened a business model built on rent-seeking, arbitrage, and subsidy-era distortions. Any reform that replaces imports with production will face pushback. This is not just a Nigeria thing. That is it's not unique to Nigeria, but successful countries around the world that we know manage that transition deliberately and intentionally, and that is something Nigeria has not managed to come close to.
And what reforms are needed to ensure that local refining is prioritized over fuel import dependence, and have those conversations started taking place, this policy transformation that needs to align with the new developments?
The mouth of government officials is full with the gospel according to reform. But you see, it is not just about words, it's about actions that are visible and are verifiable. Personally, I can think of, three reform areas that they have to get on with immediately, away from just rhetoric. First, clear offtake guarantees for locally refined fuel. Second, transparent and consistent quality standards applied equally to imports and domestic producers. And third, a sunset timeline, like I call it, for full imports once domestic capacity meets demand. Most importantly, Thami, regulators must move from a mindset of control to one of market facilitation. Regulation should enable production, not frustrate it. And it is that frustration that, Dangote is actually dealing with right now.
Mr. Collins Nweke, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for putting all of that into perspective. It certainly is an issue in a sector that we continue to watch very closely as developments unfold. Thank you for your time, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Thami.
Thank you. That was Senior International Trade Consultant and author of Economic Diplomacy of the Diaspora, Collins Nweke, taking us to 25 minutes after 4.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
So there are some really strong views that Starlink could be closer to launching in South Africa. This follows a directive by Communications Minister Solly Malatsi to the telecoms regulator to review its local ownership rules. Malatsi issued the directive to the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa last week, that is ICASA. It could pave way for Elon Musk's SpaceX and other satellite internet companies to operate in South Africa without meeting the 30% local black ownership requirement. But as you know, there has been backlash on this, saying that this is unprocedural, unconstitutional, and not the way to go. But nonetheless, a communique has been issued by Minister Solly Malatsi. SABC News economics reporter Nosipo Khatebe has more on the story.
Malatsi has responded to the criticism, saying people aren't genuinely concerned about policy, but instead using outrage to slow down progress.
For some context, in May this year, we issued a policy directive that sought to harmonize regulations between both the provisions of the BBBE Act and also the regulations that were issued by the Independent Communications Authority in 2021, which resulted in a limitation that we believe should not have happened, where it limited the provisions to empowerment to only ownership. That process went through an open public process. We received over 19,000 submissions. Upon further interrogation of those submissions, 15,000 of them were substantive. The other were duplicate submissions.
Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies, Kusela Tiko, has called on ICASA to apply its mind on the minister's directive.
Now, what we are prepared to do as Parliament is that we're going to convene a meeting early in the year where we are going to appraise the committee of these developments and obviously ask the Minister to brief us. As I said before, this is not the first time we are going to be doing it, but we are dealing with a minister who seems very intent on undermining Parliament, very intent on undermining the law. We have sought to understand whether a policy directive, which is of such huge import, he's even brought it before Cabinet for consideration. While it's not a requirement, we would think that something of this nature, which seeks to tamper with the laws of this country, he would have at least sought the wisdom of his collective. It seems that he has not done that here either.
Meanwhile, business writer for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza, says the approach by the minister may be legal, but it brings into question the original intention of empowerment rules by changing how transformation is achieved.
Companies in the sector that I look at, technology, media, and telecoms, we've seen that a lot of international technology companies have been using this. However, its use in telecommunications specifically is where the real angst is right now, because the empowerment has always focused on ownership in telecommunications. So it's almost a feeling at this point, that's where the opposition comes from, people feeling that the rules are being bent to accommodate Starlink, whose founder, Elon Musk, has said he's not going to, take on an ownership type of discussion. So, this is where we are. All of it, there is empowerment. However, the issue at hand is how do you deal with the conversation around ownership?
National African Farmers Union President Motsepe Matlala acknowledges that smallholder farmers in South Africa do not have adequate access to the internet, but says relaxing policy to benefit certain individuals is not a good idea.
Because clearly our historical oppressive methods where black farmers were excluded to the markets, were excluded to own anything, including land. When anybody then come into South Africa just because he is somebody, then our law or our rules are relaxed. I think that is absolutely unfair. That is not really recognizing the plight of the previously oppressed people.
ICASA has yet to respond to the directive. Nosipo Khatebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
It has gone exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Just a quick reminder, still coming up on the other side of your market indicators and your sports, we'll take a look at the cravings report. This is all things yummy, what South Africans enjoyed ordering in the year 2025. Uber Eats joining us for that conversation, and also those who are depositors in Itala Bank now finally, after almost an entire year, able to access their funds. This is our focal point this afternoon in our FNB slot. Standing by now for your latest market indicators at 4:30. A very good afternoon to you, Tabiso Lehoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Sis Thami, and a very good afternoon. $1 in South Africa is trading at 16 Rand 87. In Botswana, it's at 13.51 Namibia, 16 Namibian dollars 87. And in Zambia, it is trading at 23.1 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling, 3.99. Ethiopia, 155 birr, 22. Uganda, 3,000 shilling, 5.32. And in Tanzania, it's trading at 2,000 shilling, 4.69. In Nigeria, the dollar will cost you 1,451 naira. In Egypt, 47 Egyptian pound 49. Tunisia, a 2 dinar 914. Algeria, 128 dinar 986. And the Moroccan dirham is trading at 188 to the dollar. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza. It's a Congolese franc, 2,221 to the US dollar. Gold is trading at $4,345 and platinum $1,769 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $60.80 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport on this Monday afternoon, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Desk. So the International Cricket Council as well as Joy Star have reiterated their long-term association and denied any suggestion that the media partner is going to pull out for another 4-year, is looking rather to pull out for the 4-year $3 billion deal. In a statement released over the weekend, Joy Star said it was fully committed to honour its contractual obligations in a letter and spirit. Now, both organisations remain focused now on delivering uninterrupted world-class coverage of upcoming ICC events to fans across India, including the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, one of the sport's most anticipated global tournaments. The official statement also read days after reports had emerged that the company is considering withdrawing from the deal that is set to run until 2027. Back home now, Tim Sugazi, the chairman of South African football club side, that is Tears Galaxy, has once again taken aim at corporate South Africa, accusing major companies of overlooking the club despite a strong platform. Now, Sugazi singled out one of the country's leading banks, the First National Bank, also known as FNB, claiming the bank withdrew from football sponsorship after Cape Town City's relegation last season because it was unwilling to partner with a black-owned club. Despite what he views as an unfair disadvantage, the Rockets' boss insists that they will keep pushing forward and building on the progress they've made already.
We can't be shy about it. We have to be vocal. But be that as may, with or without, I think we've illustrated our resilience. With or without, the sponsor we're going to build, we're on course, on the right path to building one of the best clubs in South Africa. I'm saying that, and I think I'm unequivocally clear. I have no doubt about it. We are on the right path, right course. It shall happen. We are on our way forward. So if you can pinpoint these type of issues.
Now, Sugazi said being a club that sells their best assets to keep on reinvesting will keep them afloat, but the quicker way to success, of course, is obviously sponsorship. Meanwhile, the Galaxy boss was asked about considering an alternative venue in Nelspruit, that's in the Mpumalanga province right here in South Africa, to have bigger crowds at matches to sell more tickets, and this was his response.
A small stadium doesn't attract supporters. That's the starting point. It is the club and its quality that attracts supporters. So the last game we had, ROCA, this lower concourse main was almost filled up. So you have a population in the province, I don't know of how many millions, let's say 10. This stadium is 40,000 capacity. So we should be able to fill up the stadium. As a matter of fact, in light of our last 2 games outside this one of Kaizer Chiefs, I watched other games and I realized that we attract more supporters than our counterparts out there. So that's great.
Onto the story now. Tennis icon Billie Jean King says the WTA remain leaders in women's sport after signing a record-breaking sponsorship contract. King was speaking after the WTA and Mercedes-Benz announced a long-term partnership understood to be worth $44.5 million per year, up to 10 years, with the potential to be the largest in women's sport.
Well, it means so much to me, but it means so much to the players who are playing and the future generations, which is what we want to do, is to influence them, to create fun, connection, and also to dream big. And this partnership is going to help the culture of the world to think like that, for boys and for girls, but particularly girls who many times are left behind. So this is really wonderful.
And finally, the International Tennis Integrity Agency, also known as the ITIA, announced that Quinton Follett has been fined $70,000 in order to repay more than $44,000 in illicit payments linked to match-fixing activity. The French tennis player has also been banned from the sport for about 20 years after being found guilty of 27 breaches of the tennis anti-corruption program. The sanction follows an investigation which concluded the 24-year-old had acted as a central figure in a network of players working on behalf of a wider criminal syndicate. Follett becomes the sixth player sanctioned in connection with the case, joining Jamie Floyd Angile, Paul Vaseshi, Luke Fomba, Lucas Boquet, as well as Enzo Remoli. And that concludes your sports news this afternoon on Channel Africa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, call us on +27 11714 4459. There'll be more sporting updates tomorrow morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. The voice of the continent. Now online. With all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more.
It is exactly 4:38 Central African Time. South Africa's Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, says the country has identified a clear pathway to energy security, a move that he believes will also unlock greater industrialization and create much-needed jobs. The minister was speaking in the capital, Pretoria, where he briefed the media on the pre-qualified bidders under the first phase of the Independent Transmission Projects procurement program. Channel Africa's economics reporter, Innocent Somoza, was at that briefing and filed this report.
Load shedding has been one of the most damaging constraints on South Africa's economy in recent years, with effects still being felt today, even as outages have eased now called load reductions in some parts of the country. Load shedding reduced tax revenue as companies earned less, while government spending increased to support Eskom bailouts, diesel cost, and emergency interventions. Municipal finances were strained as electricity sales declined. South Africa's Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, says the country has identified a clear pathway to energy security.
We have found our path to energy security. We are discovering our path to broadening the industrialization and creating the necessary jobs. And energy is going to be a catalyst. Like I said when I started, energy was a crisis, is the one that throttled and stifled economic growth. Now that the Eskom has done tremendous work, thanks to the work of the board and the Eskom management team, the grid is performing. On any, we've got more than enough electricity. But we're in the business of growing the South African economy. We don't celebrate that the units are on cold reserve. We must give that the electricity to industry, and that's why we are finalizing our discussions with the smelters.
I asked the minister, what message does this announcement send to investors about policy certainty and South Africa's commitment to energy reform? Here's what he had to say.
I spoke about the regulation, transmission regulations. I spoke about the TSO. I spoke about access to the grid access rules. So most of those are in place. So we're really showing to the market that this process is irreversible. And again, this is another confidence-building measure to come out within the timelines we have set for ourselves to say this is the direction we are going. The fact that Minister of Finance has said our initial seed capital, 2 billion rand in the CGV, he announced it in the medium-term budget policy statement. Again, that should give a reassurance that we are moving in the right direction.
The minister shared updates on the pre-qualified bidders under the first phase of the Independent Transmission Projects procurement program. He says communities near these projects will benefit beyond electricity generation in ownership, development, and economic inclusion.
And then there are bigger benefits to the South African economy from a point of view of the localization of the key components. It doesn't follow that if these lines we know they're in the Northern Cape, Free State, and Gauteng, It doesn't mean that those benefits are going to be just isolated to those areas. If we decide to build a factory in Limpopo, it means that the benefits is going to extend to those areas. So really there's a broader benefits to the South African economy and not just to those economies within or communities rather, within the immediate footprint of those power stations.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African time as we turn our focus now on Uber Eats. They've released their 2025 South Africa Cravings Report, revealing what South Africans ate, what they ordered and what they loved this year. For the second year in a row, fried chicken, can you believe it, was the country's most searched food. Earlier on in our conversation, burger and chips was put on as the top one, or maybe fish and chips, whatever the case may be. But there you have it, fried chicken, the most searched food in the country. And that was followed by, can you believe it, malva pudding. It is one of my personal favorites. So yes, I do believe that. Now, the report didn't just track food orders. It also highlighted record-breaking delivery stats, high-spending super users, quirky all-cap notes, and even love letters tucked into grocery deliveries. For more on this, we joined on the line by General Manager for Uber Eats Sub-Saharan Africa, Ntswaki Nsibanyoni. A very good afternoon to you. What a delicious set of results that you received. Welcome.
Thank you, Thami. Afternoon to you and afternoon to the listeners. Definitely very fun to put together.
Now, other than the country's favorite fried chicken, what were the other top food items that South Africans craved in 2025? I mean, when we were debating about this in the studio, we had the likes of, burger and chips coming up because burgers seem to be so popular, maybe fish and chips, but no fried chicken. But what else made the top list?
Well, thank you, Thami. While fried chicken really made the biggest choice of South Africans, just to give you context, more than 490,000 searches this year nationally were about chicken, fried chicken, and this was consistent across all major cities in South Africa. What was also interesting is that the fried chicken came out tops as you give it a combo with pap. So that really came out top.
Excuse me, can you hang on? I think we need to backtrack a little bit. Fried chicken and pap.
Fried chicken and pap, Thami, was the top most searched combo.
Wow. All right, let's move on.
Hence, I said this was really a fun report to put together.
No, it certainly was.
Yeah, I mean, pizza does follow as a big loved cuisine, particularly if you look at late nighters, Cape Town leading really in the late night cuisine searches. Also quick, interesting things where like people loved to have extra pickles in their burgers and their menus. So there's a variety in how South Africans really became passionate about what they want, their cuisine types, and like you said, putting notes and really, really going big in terms of expressing themselves, showcasing really the diversity of South Africans in terms of their eating habits, and really us being the platform of choice to help them get that experience. We couldn't be more happy.
I mean, are there brands, and you don't have to really mention brands that really stood out as far as the fried chicken is concerned? Are people ordering a particular brand of fried chicken, or is it just fried chicken across the different flavors and across the different brands?
It really is across the different flavors and brands, Thami. I mean, you'll be surprised that as much as you could have global brands topping the charts, but local cuisines, right? The mom and pop shops, containers at the corner in Khayelitsha, in Soweto and Katlehong also really make amazing fried chicken. And those as well came out tops in our searches.
Wow. And how do the cravings for 2025 compare to previous years? Is there anything new that maybe stood out? And what is it that perhaps just stayed the same and is quite consistent?
So fried chicken is a winner for second consecutive year. So I think it's standing the test of time. I think the things that kind of stood out this year in South Africa was really how big Valentine's was, how creative people were. We saw that normally we see people just sending chocolates in previous years, but this year people were actually now curating bundles to send them to their loved ones. And those were the funny things and the amazing things that we're sitting on, how expressive South Africans were in terms of really putting together what they loved for their loved ones and how they just used convenience to the next level.
You also curated the numbers. How many people placed daily orders throughout the year? And what does that say perhaps about the convenience culture that we've become accustomed to?
Very, very important one. Thanks for that one, Thami. Over 1,200 people at least placed an order a day for the whole year this year, right? We also saw that there was one top eater that made over 2,700 orders, spending over 465K this year alone. And then one other element that was very interesting for us was that there was one eater that ordered from the same restaurant 419 times this year.
My goodness. They can really just get a chef in and be able to pay that chef really well, and have different speciality, dishes made for them. So let's look at the spending patterns then, the big spenders that you've spoken about to some of the savings. How does this compare to previous years? Are people, spending more on takeout, or is it much of a muchness?
People are spending much, much more on convenience, and Thami. The convenience culture is growing aggressively in South Africa. And as I said, we are more than happy to be the platform of choice, touching their lives every day. We saw that year on year, our numbers are growing in terms of how we see people are spending, not only in volumes, also in value. Just to give you one element, I spoke about the one eater with 465K. We also saw how premium spirits topped the chart this year. We had one spender just spending over 17,000 for a bottle of premium tequila. Another eater, same spent around 17K tequila and 2 bottles of premium whiskey. Because then why would you want to have one bottle of whiskey? Just have
when you can have 2, just go for it. So did the report also look at any significant regional differences in ordering habits, and maybe late night ordering habits differing maybe between cities in the year?
I suppose not surprised yet about Cape Town. They were the late nighters, consistently, probably being a tourist area, also with university. Johannesburg and Cape Town really topped the charts in terms of Valentine's Day. They really went big on Valentine's Day. Interesting enough, Durban really was the city that topped the charts in terms of plant-based orders. So seems like Durban people are very, very healthy there. And really the busiest restaurant was KFC Grayston Drive with over 84,000 orders placed this year.
Wow, good for them, 84,000. And I'm sure that's also helped to spike up that most searched chicken engine as far as fried chicken is concerned. Well, look, we are right in the middle of the festive season now. So I'm sure you are gearing yourself up for a bumper festive season. Wishing you all the best for Uber Eats Sub-Saharan Africa as you continue delivering convenience to households around the country. Have yourself a great one.
Thank you, Thami. Thank you to your listeners.
Thank you. That was General Manager for Uber Eats Sub-Saharan Africa, Nzwaki Nsebanyoni. She takes us to exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time, and you say bonjour, bonjour, bonjour to you, Joël.
Bonjour à toi, Thami.
So let me ask you,
Oui?
Do you use Uber Eats quite a lot? Do you order in?
I never use Uber Eats.
You don't use, you always cook?
Always cook. I cook every day.
You cook every day. My goodness, do you know that there's a gentleman or somebody who ordered, in 1 year, they've ordered 465,000 rands worth of food from Uber Eats. They ordered 2,700 orders.
Why? No, I just need to
because
they don't have the time to cook, or they don't want to cook, or they don't know.
We have no idea. Maybe a Joël might, offer their services and earn themselves 465,000 in a year just for a little side
Isn't that
gig.
a lot of money?
It is a lot of money.
Oh, wow.
It is, but people will pay for convenience. Yeah, so what do you have on your menu today on
Bonjour à
Vue
tous les
d'Afrique?
auditeurs de Channel Africa et particulièrement de Vue d'Afrique. Sur Vue d'Afrique, tout à l'heure, il sera question des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de la CEDEAO qui réaffirment leur rejet de toute prise de pouvoir par la force lors de leur dernier sommet. Nous en parlerons avec notre correspondant sur place et nous parlerons aussi de la Confédération des États du Sahel qui regroupe le Burkina Faso, le Mali et le Niger, qui a officiellement posé les bases de sa propre institution financière. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joelle coming up at the top of the hour with Vue d'Afrique. It is 4:52. And as we do, we bring you our FNB feature. Now, it is our final slot for the year. 2025, many people already having closed up and closing business, going on holiday. And for our last slot today, we're going to take a look at the bank's appointment by South Africa's National Treasury for it to facilitate secure payouts to Itala SOC Limited Deposited who have not had access to their funds since January of this year. Now, this process began earlier this month on the 8th through FNB's extensive national branch network. And for more on this, we're joined by Jackie O'Sullivan, Executive for Corporate Affairs at FNB. A very good afternoon to you, Jackie. Really, really great news for those depositors from Itala who haven't been able to access their money for almost a year now. Welcome.
Thank you, Thami. Yes, it really is. And it comes at a time of year when obviously people are looking for that little bit of assistance. So we were very pleased to be able to step up at the request of National Treasury.
And I'm quite interested in how this came about, why it is that National Treasury chose you as FNB to be the facilitator in this process.
So the rationale behind it, I guess, is best posed to Treasury, but I think the conversations that were had were very much around the footprint. The important thing was that we wanted to make sure, or at least for the purposes of those customers, those Itala customers, they needed to have access to a branch that was as close to them as possible. And we realized that most of our branches, particularly in KZN, are within 1 kilometer of what were the previous Itala branches. So our hope was that we could make it as easy as possible for the customers to be able to access their funds without having to incur costs. So if you were a customer at Itala in Ladysmith, you would be able to very easily get to an FNB branch in Ladysmith to complete your transaction.
So being very strategically located there really doesn't require the clients to do anything different to what they would have been doing anyway if they were banking with Itala. So how is the bank ensuring security as well as compliance? Because both of those are just so important when it comes to people's money.
Absolutely, Thami. It's critical. It is a bit of a process. We've managed to simplify it to just some basics. So we have what you call a know your customer policy. This is something that all banks and service providers like telcos are all liable to the same requirements. So we need to be able to identify our customers. So what we need our the customers that we're going to be serving to be able to produce documentation of who they are. So they need to be able to produce their ID document. They need to be able to produce their proof of residence, and then we will be able to pull their data from the information that has been provided to us. Then there's a validation process that has to happen. So we need to make sure that we're paying the right people with the right ID numbers. So there's a quality assurance and verification process as part of the fulfillment of this solution. And that can take up to 2 days. Sometimes it's less than that. And then we can make the payout to the customer.
And in terms of operational readiness as FNB, are your branches managing, especially in terms of the long queues? It's the festive season. So even without the Itala clients, you would have had your clients in the queues as well.
Absolutely. It's been a significant consideration for us. So the way that we've approached this is we've got a staggered rollout of the payouts. So we're encouraging customers to wait until they get their SMS. They will receive, we're sending out batches of 5,000, and that basically indicates when people should come to the branch that's closest to them. if they happen to be anywhere else in the country, any other FNB branch will be able to serve them. That's no problem. But the idea behind having this staggered approach is that we can make sure that payouts go as smoothly as possible so that people don't sit in long queues for an extended period of time. We recognize when we first assisted earlier this year with the payment of SASSA grants, we have large numbers of elderly people that need to be served, people that are coming from rural areas. They've potentially had to get a taxi or arrange some sort of transport to get to the bank. So we really want to try and process people as well as we can. And the SMS system seems to be working fairly well. If you arrive and you haven't received your SMS, that's not a problem. We'll still try and serve you. But the idea behind the SMS is just try and make it as user-friendly as possible.
Jackie, we've got listeners from all over the African continent, and perhaps someone is listening and saying, why couldn't these people access their funds for almost a year? Can we backtrack a little bit and just put that into context for our listeners, and also about how many people actually have been impacted?
So the whole process with Utala is being managed through National Treasury. So I'm not really in a position to speak to that. What I can say is basically what happens when you have a situation where a bank is in some sort of a situation where bank accounts have to be frozen. Basically what happens is the bank accounts are frozen on the day that's identified by the parties involved. And from that day onwards, those funds are inaccessible. Those funds do not earn any interest, but they are safe as part of the process that is run through, in this instance, National Treasury, the Prudential Authority, and the other regulatory environments that are responsible for this. So when FNB gets involved is really once those various authorities have made the decision on how they want to proceed, and then we go ahead and we provide that assistance. So that's really been the delay. We went through a really rigorous process in that we needed to receive the actual data of the customers. You're looking at 200,000 people that need to be paid out. And we needed to make sure that we could receive the information, and then we could create a tool which would allow us to have access directly as the customer comes in. We can go through the documentation, we can do the verification, and then we can manage that payout. So that's really the process that's been followed.
Thank you so much, Jackie O'Sullivan. The bearer of good news, really, this festive season for all of those, I guess, 250,000 plus. Those are some of the numbers that have been reported of the number of people that have been impacted, the depositors. Jackie O'Sullivan, Executive for Corporate Affairs at FNB, thank you so much, and have yourself a splendid festive season.
Thanks, Thami, you too.
Thank you. She takes us to exactly 5 p.m. Central African time. And that's how we come to the end of our time together on this Monday afternoon. We hand over now to Vue d'Afrique. Restez connectés.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à tous et encore une fois, merci de votre fidélité à cette nouvelle édition de Vue d'Afrique, le magazine d'actualité africaine en langue française sur Canal Afrique. Je suis Joël Mouteba.